Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and I'm here to discuss with you some of the overall aspects of experiential education and for international students doing internships with us here in the U.S. I will, being here at the University of Kentucky, of course on campus, I will be speaking from some of our experiences, but I also believe I can speak for generally overall U.S. campuses that would have experiential education programs, and certainly how you would be able to take advantage of these. One thing I want to do first, though, is just take a moment to talk about the benefits of your fieldwork experiences overall. As you can see on the slide, there are many. And here in the U.S., we have our employers are telling us more and more now that they look at relevant professional experience. That's now at the top of the list. That's what they look for in resumes, and that's what they want students to be able to have to show them that, in fact, they have already been out in the field and are starting to get some of this professional, pre-professional level work. This is such a great benefit, these experiences for you, because you're able to learn more about yourself. Obviously, when you're out there, you're going to be learning about your strengths and weaknesses, values, and importantly, what you like and dislike. You might be getting in to a situation that you go, you know, this isn't what I thought this particular professional field is about. I think I may need to change gears here and perhaps change my major. So you learn a lot, as much from what you may not like about it as what you in fact do like. Of course, the great thing is when you're able to confirm that it is in fact the area that you've selected is what you know now you want to do. Obviously, professional skills are very important, and you can gain transferable skills and things that are important to our employers: communication skills, team building skills, the area in terms of critical thinking, all the things that you do gain when you're out there in the field and that you cannot necessarily be able to obtain while in the classroom. This is certainly an important opportunity for you to gain networking opportunities. You're going to be meeting a lot of folks, not just within the organization where you work, but also perhaps some professional associates that may be able to help you later. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, it really does help you define your career path. It's the best, very best way to be able to get out there, have the experiences, and then make a determination if in fact your selected career path is going to be the right one for you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the types of fieldwork experiences. Here in the U.S., there are any number of experiential education opportunities, and some campuses, we all might call them different things. So just to speak from the general types of opportunities that you might have, the first one being, of course, on campus. And there are oftentimes many opportunities here if you're interested in research, if there's certain areas, if you're interested in higher education, many areas that you can be able to have great opportunities right here on our college campuses. Off campus, of course, could also be, this could be an experience even at another university here in the U.S., or it could also be out there in different sectors of the areas that you wish to work. The first one that we have is for-profit or industry areas. These organizations would be the organizations who are in business to make a profit. And it's important to distinguish between a profit and a nonprofit organization. Our labor laws do affect these areas. And just keeping in mind that there would be something you'd want to be checking with your university advisor to just make sure that you are going to be working in the correct area and getting the right academic credit. So there are many, many opportunities in both for-profit and nonprofit, or also called non-governmental agencies there. There are also practicums. These are situations in where you might go off, and rather than having a field experience while you're taking classes on a campus, you might be going off and doing a clinical rotation within, of course, your field. If you might be in the area of healthcare services, nursing, those kinds of areas. Or you might select, and we have that option here, and I know they do on most other campuses, to go off and work for an entire semester and then come back, or rotate and go and work and come back to campus, take classes, and then go back. Finally, obviously, if you're in education, you will have the opportunities to do student teaching. They are certainly required in the program, so that's yet another area of experiential education. Many kinds of programs. So as you can see here, going on into the specifics, as I mentioned, you have internships, practicums, and even an independent study. That's even another distinction in that you might be able to have an opportunity to work specifically for, let's say, a professor in an area of research, or doing something that is more independent, but yet you will receive, it's still a form of experiential education, and you will receive credit for that as well. So there are quite a few options. Also, as I mentioned, they can be full-time, as a co-op would be, or part-time. They are going to be anywhere. They're going to be locally in the area where your campus may be. They're going to be, we obviously have national and even, of course, international opportunities that our students take advantage of. Many are paid, but many are also unpaid. I will say that it is very, very competitive here. And so we do find that in our community, many of the employers prefer to require academic credit, that's to stay in compliance with the labor laws, but offer great opportunities. So I do want you to be aware that your expectations of being an automatically paid experience, we want to at least let you know that there's going to be a mix. Sometimes the best opportunities are the unpaid ones because employers are trying to make up perhaps for that. So they may give you even added experiences so that they can, knowing that you're not being paid. I want to give you some extra benefits in other ways. And then, of course, we do have here at UK, you are not required to take it for academic credit, excuse me, if it is a paid internship and does meet academic as far as the labor laws. I will say also in nonprofits, any agency here in the U.S. that typically uses volunteers, if you find yourself in that situation, then the U.S. government does not require you to take that for academic credit. So you have an option of academic credit or non-credit, although I will say many of our employers do require that you take it for academic credit. And I know obviously, and Elizabeth will be addressing some of the other obligations I guess you will have in terms of getting the academic credit and the requirements. All right, I will now be turning this over to Elizabeth. She's going to address some of those things now, and will certainly be available for questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes, now I would like to talk a little bit, as Cindy, gave some general information about how internships work in the United States. There are some specifics that we want to make sure you understand as an international student or as an exchange student, because there will be some immigration and guidelines and certain rules that will make it a little bit different for you than it would be for the U.S. citizen doing the internship. So the first, and I call it challenges because, and the reason I use that word is because I do think it's harder. It's a little bit harder for international students, and we want to be honest with you about that. And I think most universities across the United States, this is true, that that you're competing with all these U.S. students, and depending on the situation, it'll be a little easier or more difficult for you. So let's just give an example of one. First of all international students have to get approval from immigration, and they have to meet specific regulatory guidelines in accordance with their visa. So that's one, it's not an impossible thing to overcome, and that's something that you can do, but it's just something that you need to be aware of, that you have to have that advanced approval before you can do an internship. The difference between, I mentioned international students and exchange students, sometimes it is more difficult for exchange students, and the reason is, it's not impossible, but it can be more difficult. And the reason is that the trend right now in the U.S. for employers is that they prefer to hire students who will remain in the U.S. after completion of a degree. So sometimes the employers are looking for who they're going to hire in a permanent job. So if you're really only going to be here as an exchange student for one semester, they may be less likely. They might be more likely to hire an international student who's going to obtain a degree, but less likely for the exchange students. The second thing, or the third thing, is that competition is tough. And Cindy mentioned that it's very competitive, And we're going to talk a little bit at the end about alumni services and why in the last 10 years universities have started to have alumni services. And the main reason is because of this competition. And the competition comes with the fact that the economy, when the economy has a downside, it gets harder. So the competition is really tough. So that's a challenge for international students and exchange students that they have to overcome. And then the last part is U.S. labor laws. Cindy mentioned that a little bit. In the U.S., they do not allow some employers to have unpaid work experience unless required to enroll in a course or receive academic credit. So if you are a for-profit company, you're going to need to require the student who does the internship be enrolled in a course. The good news is, just like we have here at UK, we have courses that you can enroll in to receive that credit, and many universities in the United States do have credits that, a course that a student can enroll in to receive credit. So that's the good news. But it's just, we want you to be aware that some employers will need you to take that academic credit, and they'll need to know that you're able to. So say, for example, if you're interviewing, you'd want to point out, oh, at my university, they do allow me to take credit for that internship. And then that'll put the mind of the employer at ease. So those are some of the challenges. Also, Cindy's going to talk a little bit about how, actually it looks like our next slide is academic internship. Yes, actually it's back to Cindy. Okay, hold on, we're just switching back and forth.
This is so important too, to be aware of the differences between those. I did touch on those, but again, so that when you do come, you're aware that you do have some options. As I said, here at the university, we do not necessarily always require credit. Again, though, that will depend upon the situation that you are in with your visa permissions and all of the other areas that you might find yourself in. And also, again, employers may very well have restrictions or specify that you must register for credit. So what we refer to, and what I believe other U.S. campuses would refer to, would be academic internships, meaning that you are going to be taking this for academic credit versus excuse me, non-credit internships, because that does mean that you're having the experiences out there. And as we get into that, if you want to just take a look at the information that we have on what's the differences between the two, as I say, you're doing it for credit, and this can be either on a semester basis while you are here still taking classes, or if you're off doing a practicum or a co-op. We use a document called a learning contract. And that is actually the document that will be guiding you and a faculty member throughout the entire process. It involves reflective learning, which is the most important aspect to experiential learning. So that's a very important document, and I would venture to say all internship offices do have something similar to a contract. That contract being between you and a faculty member, in that you will complete all the reflective assignments that are required, in addition to, of course, showing up at your internship, which is obviously important, and doing a good job for them. So again, it may be full-time. We've talked about that and all the other areas. Of course, the non-credit just means that here in the U.S., you're doing it for experience gained, not for the academic recognition. It is not going to show up on a transcript here. So sometimes there might be some disadvantages for that, and therefore if someone goes to check for the fact that, in fact, you did do an internship here at the University of Kentucky, it's probably very true, but unfortunately we cannot go back and verify that because you did not take it for academic credit, and we therefore have no paperwork. So just something to be aware of when you're looking at the options. You may still want to opt for academic credit rather than going into the non-credit area. So I'm now going to turn it right back to Elizabeth, and she will discuss with you the international rules and obligations that you will have. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Cindy. And so now I'm going to talk, just a little bit about the, starting to address the immigration rules specific to international students. So first I'm going to talk about international students on the F1 visa. They must receive and enroll in a course for academic credit. So we've been talking about, academic versus non-academic credit, but the visa status and the visa rules are what will determine sometimes for the international students which pathway they must go. So that's, as I mentioned in the beginning, that aspect is different for international students. So let's talk about the F1 visa status. So if you're an undergraduate student, you can typically register, as we mentioned, for a course using the Career Center. So that you would register for that course and then secure the internship. Then you would come to the international office and they would give you permission with immigration in order to take that course. And we'll talk a little bit more about when you would be eligible to do that. The second, if you are a graduate student, you have to enroll in a graduate level course credit. So undergraduate can use the Career Center, and graduate students should be enrolling in graduate level course credit. However, some universities, although I will say this is a little bit rare, we do have this at the University of Kentucky where you can register for graduate level internships through our Career Center. But it's not required or obligated. I mean, there's other options that you can do this through your department as long as it's a graduate level course. But I just want you to be aware, not all universities in the U.S. you would be able to use the career services if it's a graduate student. And then the last group, the exchange students, the immigration law actually doesn't require you to enroll in course credit. But we want to point out that students will be limited to nonprofit or positions which are normally created for volunteers if you don't enroll in course credit. And the reason is because if you're an exchange student and you go out and try to get a position with a for-profit company, remember they're going to have you enroll in academic credit because of labor laws. So if you don't enroll in course credit, you're going to be more limited and only be able to look for positions with nonprofit or positions that are normally created for volunteers. So now let's talk a little bit more about the F1 status. So you've went to the Career Center, you've registered for your course, or you secured your internship. So now you need to get permission with immigration. And what we call this is curricular practical training. That is the immigration term used, and that's across the U.S. It doesn't matter which university. This is a benefit that is eligible for students that are in the F1 visa status. And as I said, it is a benefit, and you actually receive it from the school official at the university that is designated to give permission for you to do this through immigration. So there's no application you have to send and pay a fee to a national immigration service and wait for a decision. It doesn't work like that. As long as you meet the criteria, the school can actually give you the permission to do it, the school official. So that's one of the really nice things about curricular practical training for the F1 student. Now it has to be, there are rules around it. You can't just do any type of job, so it has to be integral part of your established curriculum. And a student must complete at least 1 year and be enrolled in one academic course. So again, in order to get the CPT, even though maybe some internships won't require that you take a course, if you are in the F1 visa status, and F1 visa status is typically for students who are going to obtain a degree from the university in the United States. They're the type of student that would be on this visa. So, so you would need to complete, and what we mean by one academic year is 2 semesters. So you couldn't do this internship if you were an F1 student your very first semester. You would have to be here 2 terms, 2 sessions before you'd be eligible. I also want to mention that full-time with immigration actually is 21 hours or more. So, so that it means full-time. You don't have to do 40 hours for immigration to consider it to be full-time. In the U.S., 40 hours is traditionally full-time. but for the immigration world, 21 hours is considered full-time. There is a limit to 12 months of full-time, and technically there's really not a limit, but the limit, if you go beyond 12 months, the reason we say limit is because if you do 12 months, you won't be eligible to get work authorization when you complete your degree. And we're going to talk about after graduation and what work experiences are available to you after graduation. But just keep that in mind, that you won't be eligible to do it if you use 12 months of curricular practical training. Now, what about the J-1? The J-1 visa status is typically the exchange students there, but not always. The J-1 is also available to students who will get a degree in the United States as well. The J-1 status for students getting a degree is usually through a program such as Fulbright or IIE, or the student is being funded by their government and the government requires that they be on a J-1 exchange visitor status. So it can be for a degree seeking or a non-degree seeking student. Typically, you know, a lot of universities see a lot of non-degree seeking students in the J-1, but it can be both. So if you're a J-1, what opportunities are available for you to get permission? You also still need to get permission, and the permission you would obtain is something called academic training. It can be paid or unpaid, but it must be, just like with the F1 students, it has to be related experience to the major field of study. And it can be while you're pursuing your program or after you complete your program. So that's one of the differences with the F1 and the J-1. J-1 just has one type of work authorization, and you can do it before or after you graduate or complete whatever program you're doing. The total training period cannot exceed or be longer than the amount of your study. So I want to give just a basic example that we see here sometimes. A student who's given a program length of 1 semester. So if you come here just for 1 semester as an exchange student, you would only be eligible for 1 semester of academic. So your time in an internship or work experience can't exceed the time that you were studying here. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And so the J-1 visa status is a program that you come for, and you can't do an internship longer than your program. So they need to be equal. Employment is employer specific, so that's important. Any change in employment would require that you get new permission from your advisor. So if you do half a semester with one employer and then have another opportunity, you'd have to come back and we'd have to give you permission to change that employer. So that's also important. I want to talk about, so we've been talking about the J-1 for degree or non-degree, but there is this special category called J-1 student intern visa status. And it's something that's become popular, more popular among U.S. Universities, I would say in the last like 5 to 6 years. That more universities are using this. This is different than a student who comes for a program, say to study for a semester or to study for a degree on a J-1. This is a student who actually comes to the U.S. for the sole purpose of doing an internship. And it's called the J-1 student intern category. And you can search many university websites and see universities that offer this J-1 student intern. The thing to be aware of this is that career services, my colleague Cindy, would rarely be involved in this. And in fact, I don't think I ever call Cindy when this comes up, because the student actually comes to the U.S. after having found the internship already. And typically, career services are not going to be successful with helping you to find an internship when you're not already in the United States. So the J-1 student intern would be unusual for career services, although there could be some universities that offer it. So I don't want to say none, but I've been in the field for a while, and I think it's kind of rare, even if they do have it. It doesn't hurt to ask your university. But the way I see it work is a student will make a relationship with a faculty member at say, for example, on our campus. and they will contact that faculty member and ask about the possibility of doing an internship in some type of research or getting some type of field experience. And that faculty member will sponsor that student. So then there's paperwork that is completed, and through the international office, again, it's really the career services is very little involvement. The faculty member contacts the international office and asks for us to help them with helping the student with the immigration side. So we do paperwork and send it to the student abroad. The student applies for the J1 student intern category, which is really important to know that that is the category they apply for. And then they enter the U.S. That intern maximum is 1 year, so you can't extend it. There's no options for extension. It's just 1 year. It could be shorter, but the maximum is 1 year. So the primary goal of this visa is not to study and do some internship after or while you're studying, but the primary goal is to gain work experience and not to study. So it differs from the regular J1 visa status. As I mentioned, you have to locate a faculty member at a university and work with a company that places students. I do want to mention there are companies in the U.S. that do place students in internships. So I'm only vaguely familiar with that, but I do know that it exists. There are companies in the U.S. that have the J1 program and that actually place students in these internships. They can be paid or unpaid, and you enter the U.S. for the primary purpose, as we mentioned, of doing the internship. Typically, they are paid, actually, because generally in that situation, the faculty member would use it for that purpose. If they're not going to pay the person, then they might just recommend that they come on a different visa and do some kind of study rather than make it like an internship. So here at our university, most of the cases they are paid if they're using the student intern, but it's not required. It could be either. So now we've talked about the internships and work experiences you gain prior, and we've said after graduation, but it can also be after your program completion at the university. And the reason we added this, the title of our session is Career Services, Internships, and More. Well, this is the and more part of our presentation. And what we've realized is that a lot of international students or a lot of people abroad don't realize that there is help for students when they complete their coursework, something called Alumni Career Services. So Cindy works with colleagues that actually are a part of Career Services, but they're also separate because they offer separate services just for alumni, for students who graduate from our university. And so I recently interviewed somebody in the Alumni Career Services and asked them, why do we need help? Why do alumni need help? And maybe it's obvious to everybody, but it's really the poor worldwide economy, and it makes it more challenging to obtain employment. And one of the things that she told me that I actually didn't realize, and that is within the last 10 years, there is a real trend across the United States to support alumni in their career search. And there's even an organization, and I put the website on the slide there, that was formed in 2005. So it started out with just a few universities really saying, you know, this seems to be a need that we have in the U.S. and more universities. And now it's pretty much considered an expectation. So, you know, your university is seen as maybe not in with the times if they're not offering such a service. So it's really a great opportunity for alumni to be able to get that when they finish their degree. And some of the common services that they would offer would be career assessment, exploration, and that's really critical because especially when you first complete your degree, and just really making sure that you are really assessing what you need to be doing and where you need to be looking for employment. They'll critique resumes and profiles. a customized job search campaign, employer search, personal branding. She had mentioned to me they also do here at UK 4 different personalized interviews with you, or consultations, I should call it. They'll do 4 consultations. For the first 6 months, it's free for anyone or any graduate. But then after that, they charge a nominal fee, and I think it's really very small. I think it's less than $50, as I remember, a year. So it's really $50 a year. So it's a really small fee to become a member of the Alumni Association. And U.S. universities all usually have some kind of alumni association, and these are benefits that you would get by being a part of that. So yes, and this is what we're talking about here, that some are free, and this is going to be across the board, across the U.S. Some will charge a small fee. Sometimes they will include career management and professional development and enrichment, courses that you can take, networking events. That's probably one of the key things that a lot of alumni probably benefit, is these events where they can meet other people, speaker series, mentoring programs. There's something, I don't know how familiar everyone is involved with the LinkedIn, but it's an online networking group. If you're not involved in that, you might even begin to think about, as a student, I have many students that contact me and want to be on my LinkedIn network group. So, and that's a way to kind of find out what expertise people have and to be able to share your expertise with other people. It's kind of what I call the Facebook of employment. And career counseling is usually available in person, by phone, or through email or Skype. So these are common services that we offer here at UK, and you would probably see at a lot of other universities in the United States. So what does the immigration law allow when you complete your degree? For the F1 visa, there is something different. I mentioned in the beginning with the internships, it's called curricular practical training. But with after graduation, it's called optional practical training. And it's a temporary employment for practical training related to your major area of study. You can use it during or after your studies, but most students wait to use it when they graduate. There are only 12 months of OPT for each higher degree. Now there are, some students can get longer than 12 months, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide. But generally 12 months is given as a benefit. You pretty much, if you apply, you're going to get 12 months. But to be eligible, you do have to be enrolled for classes at least 1 academic year. So if you are going to use it before graduation, you can't do it your first semester. You have to at least be 1 academic year. And again, this is for the F1 students. These are the students that are going to get a degree from the university. And then it does allow the academic training. So if a J1 student is coming and they are also getting a degree, they can use, after they complete their degree, academic training. And that particular training is limited based on the program length. But if you're here and you're on a J1 and you're going to do a doctoral program, you're going to be here for at least 4 years. So you can get a pretty lengthy amount of academic training. You can't actually get 4 years, though. It's kind of unfair because at the beginning we talked about 1 semester, you get 1 semester of internship experience, but when you complete the degree, they're not going to give you that much time. The maximum is about 36 months. So that would be the longest anybody could do, but that's quite a long period of academic training. So the J1, if you come as a degree-seeking student, you can get quite a long period of work experience. And in the case of the optional practical training, that is an application that gets sent to immigration with a fee, and you wait for a decision. So that can take 2 or 3 months after a student completes the degree before they will get the work experience. So that's something that you apply for and receive a work card, actually, in the mail students get, and then they can begin working. With academic training, it's one of those, again, the J1 does have that benefit. That can be granted by the school official. You don't have to send any application to the government with a fee. We can process the academic training in-house in our university in the international office. Now I want to talk about this 17-month optional practical training. And the reason I mentioned this separately is the first slide mentions 12 months. 12 months is pretty much if you apply, you send your application, your money, you're going to get 12 months. But not everybody can get this extra 17-month extension. It's called a 17-month OPT extension, and it's for F1 visas only. It's a one-time extension of 17 months. It has to be post-completion, so you can't get that benefit while you're still working on your degree. Must be currently working on a job related to the degree. And the employer has to be registered with something called E-Verify. It's a federal employment verification system. And the benefit is limited to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree holders in the field. And that's specified on the Department of State website exactly who qualifies for the STEM designated programs. So if a student can meet all those criteria, it's fabulous. And a lot of students here, we do see that they can meet all these criteria because more and more employers are registering with E-Verify. More and more students, and actually, if you'd asked me this even a year ago, I'd have said, you know, we're not seeing as many students use it. But in the past year, we have seen more students getting jobs that allow that longer period of time. So we are seeing more and more students using the 17-month optional practical training. And part of that is the economy. I think we saw a slight change in the last year with this visa and also with the visa that students get after graduation, which is called the H-1B visa. And that's a whole presentation by itself. But just so you know, there is a more permanent visa that comes after this. And we are seeing more students now getting that visa. So that's a good sign that maybe we're starting to see a slight change in the economy. Now we're ready for some questions. We have at least a good 20 minutes that folks can ask any question they would like to ask about the careers and work experience in the U.S. And my colleague and I would be happy to answer. If you want to put your question in the chat history at the bottom, we're happy to answer questions. Okay, so we've got Victoria from Belarus, graduated from Brest State University, and specialty social work and psychology. Can I continue my education in the U.S. in this specialty free? So I have a specialty in social work and psychology. Brest State University, where's that university? Oh, that's a university in Belarus. So you're asking the question, can I continue my education? Oh, in other words, you graduated, but you want to go on maybe for a graduate degree or, to continue, yes, to continue your education. That's what I would think would be the logical, and especially in social work and psychology. I know those two fields typically, at least in the U.S., a bachelor's degree is not enough. Typically, in those fields, you will need to go beyond a bachelor's degree. And as far as in this specialty free, well, you need to, free is a big word, but I would say you would need to look at some scholarships at different universities and apply for scholarships. Usually full scholarships are not granted to too many students, but there are definitely I would say more universities have partial scholarships, but there are a few that you could get higher scholarships or a greater amount of your tuition could be covered. But as a graduate student, what you want to look for is assistantships. So for that, you would want to look for assistantships. And assistantships is very interesting because it's kind of a work experience as well. As a graduate student, you usually work in the department, and then they cover your tuition. So what you would want to do is look at university websites and find universities that offer graduate assistantships. Well, and you would want to look in your specific department, although sometimes students will get an assistantship in a department that they are not getting their degree from. So that it doesn't necessarily mean that your assistantship has to be in the department that you are going to do your graduate studies. But you certainly want to start there. You want to start looking there. But yes, I would say assistantships. And there are some assistantships which, if you receive them and they cover all tuition and you work, it's pretty much free. Maybe you might have to pay some fees. Yeah, some of our assistantships at the University of Kentucky do cover expenses, and students usually pay just the fees, the student fees, and they could be usually less than maybe anywhere from $200 to $500 a semester. So yes, but we have both types of graduate students here. Not all of our graduate students get assistantships. So just like we talked about work experience being competitive, same thing, it's competitive. So you would have to compete with students to get that. So nice meeting you, Victoria. Okay, we've got a question here from Alexi from Kiev. Great. And is interested in places to work as an intern in the U.S. with the goal of working in a company and getting experience, and the field is computer science. So he's asking, can you give any advice about places to work as an intern in the U.S.? I mean, I would think the hot places for computer science are going to be, your technology centers. Out in California, there's quite a few companies, startup type companies. That's what you want to look at, where these companies have their headquarters. For example, I have a friend that did his internship at Apple in New York City. But New York City is going to be a hub for everything, so that's probably not always the only option. But there are other areas of the United States where there are companies that have their headquarters in certain states in the United States. So New York, California, where they have global offices. Yes, that's right. Cindy's reminding me. Yes, and that's true. A lot of these have global offices. So I would start with trying to find out where their global offices are, and and if you want to do it in the U.S., then that would lead you to particular states in the U.S. And you'll be surprised, not all of them will be California and New York. I mean, I think I know that there's some in New Jersey that have the what they call the tech centers, where there'll be like a conglomeration of several different computer companies where they'll have their office.